Brooklyn beat the brakes off Dallas last night, as Brooklyn continues to be one of the best stories in the NBA this season. Nice little play from Luka. Luka also had a really nice step-back three in this game.
Yeah, he got shook down to his knees, too. That's the only
That might be coming up.
Hawks and Heat, and DeAndre Bembry keeps finding his way into butt first with the reverse slam.
This was a good early matinee game. Came down to the end. Miami won by a point. But the Hawks got, I think, a potentially bright future. Maybe two top 10
Just get some team
picks coming.
colors, all right? You can't be powder blue.
I know.
Like the Hawks, like, stop. I'm thinking watching the Clippers. I think, like stop, Hawks, all
I'm
right?
confused with some of these.
I mean, concentrate on the basketball.
No, this is the same game, though. Hold on, right here. Justice Winslow. Nice behind-the-back dime to Bam Adebayo for the flush here.
Oh, look at Bam. Justice Winslow. Man, he's finally learned to shoot, see? It took him some time.
Oh, really?
Took him some time, and now he's been a really
Maybe
good player
you'll start
for
to
Miami.
admit shooting is harder to do.
Hold on a second.
Pelicans, Jazz.
Lord.
Anthony Davis, the go-go gadget arms, as you guys taught me.
Speaking of confusing jerseys, every time the Pelicans wear these jerseys, I think it's the Nuggets. Every time. I know they're the ones wearing them, and I still think it's Nuggets. This is AD going up and getting it.
I'm going old school Seattle Sonics.
Oh, Supersonic jerseys? I'm with that.
All right,
Gus
on to
Williams,
Antonio Brown now.
Gus Johnson.
After
Gus
a number of questionable comments he made regarding his tenuous time in Pittsburgh, it appears the Pittsburgh Steelers are ready to move on. Reportedly, they could trade Antonio Brown as early as this week. So where could the disgruntled wide receiver end up? Well, Jon Gruden and the Raiders are reportedly the most likely team to land him, while the Titans, Cardinals, and Redskins are not far behind. All right, CeCe, how good of a fit would Antonio Brown be on a Raiders roster?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, because Jon Gurden, what kind of offense they going to run? Like, who's going to be their quarterback? Because they're on the board to get another quarterback. So now if they're able to get Kyler, you know, what kind of offense are they going to run? So I don't know. AB is most effective in a three-receiver offense where he can move up and down, where he can play in the slot. He can play both the X and the Z. He's one of the few smaller guys, I'm talking about 5'10" or smaller, that can play outside and can play, more in particular, the X receiver to the boundary, where you have to build a block and the responsibilities. It's made for a bigger, but he's been able to show the flexibility with his route running, the ability to defeat double teams. Man, he can get the ball short and make big plays. So he fits into a lot of offense. I just don't know what offense the Raiders are going to run. And if Jon Gruden, if he's going to be successful, he has to replace the two players and the thing that he got the most criticism for. Amari Cooper, great locker room guy, good football player. Khalil Mack, great locker room guy, great football player. He has to be able to replace those guys to be able to regain some credibility. If I knew who the quarterback was, I might be able to say, okay, I believed it. But AB fits in any offense in the National Football League, but I just don't know who's going to be Gruden's quarterback, and I don't know if Gruden's system really has a name.
Culturally, it would be very odd to jettison a guy like Khalil Mack, a guy like Amari Cooper, and bring in Martavis Bryant, and then bring in Antonio Brown. That is the opposite of typically when a guy comes in as a head coach and tries to set a culture. Sometimes you get rid of some quality players because they have some maybe off-the-field issues, or you think some discipline issues, whatever it is. He got rid of two guys who had no discipline character issues. Amari might not have been productive the last couple years there, but Khalil Mack was productive and excellent. And to bring in Antonio Brown. Now, it would be a very interesting case study in Antonio Brown finding out how the other half lives. You go from the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, their decade after decade after decade of success, their facilities, their ownership, to the Oakland Raiders, who once upon a time, when you were at Ohio State, the Raiders were one of the true standard franchises in the NFL.
If Al Davis was alive, I'd be like, man, go get him.
Right, but the last 30 years
Al
is a little
Davis,
different.
He makes it work. He makes veteran players that aren't happy, and the Raiders at that point, they were a destination for guys who had great careers and people had given up on them. Man, they just cultivated this environment that guys thrived in. But they also had a bunch of Raiders that were drafted by the Raiders, guys like Howie Long, foundational guys. So people forget about that. They just think it was a bunch of renegades. No, it wasn't. It was cultivated the right way by the draft, using free agency, picking up some veteran players, adding a lot of talent to a roster and a place where a lot of NFL players wanted to play.
You make an interesting point that you don't know how he's going to fare because you don't know what kind of offense or who the quarterback is. Look at the other teams that are looking at him. Washington, you don't know who the quarterback's going to be there. The Cardinals, we're not sure who's the quarterback is going to be there. And then you have the Titans with an injury-prone Marcus Mariota.
Right. We know who the quarterback is there.
Correct.
We just don't know if he's going to be good and healthy
or available.
On the field. No,
exactly. So all those teams.
It's a great observation, Jenna, and this is why Chris and Larry Fitzgerald both have said in the last week or so, careful what you wish for now. Because no matter how bad it got with Big Ben, you knew you were going to get Pro Bowl level quarterback play. You knew you were going to have nationwide support wherever you went. Great ownership, great facilities. That's not the case everywhere. You talk about Washington. Daniel Snyder is, depending on who you ask, it can be hit or miss ownership-wise. The Bidwell family in Arizona, there's some good and some bad. The facilities in Oakland, until they move to Vegas, are the worst in football. That's not me. That's not an opinion. I think that's a universally regarded fact.
I would bet that out of the NCAA Division I teams, there's not a worse facility in college football than what the Raiders and what the players experience there.
Certainly not in the Power 5 conferences. There's at least 75 college programs that if you get drafted from there to the Raiders, you're like,
you're going backwards.
Right. Like, this feels like high school. And so now it'll be different for them when they move to the billion-plus mecca they're building in Vegas, but they got a year before that. But the thing you said, which is what makes the Antonio Brown conversation to me so difficult, that I totally agree with, is we know what type of offense he's best in, but a player of his talent level, even if 99% of guys are system players, they fit almost anywhere. Any team that acquires Antonio Brown gets better on the field. So, of course, the Raiders would be better. They need everything. It would just be odd culturally to trade away Amari Cooper and bring in Antonio Brown.
I have two concerns about that. Number one would be the culture, because you have to be consistent in your messaging, especially when you're trying to change a program like Gruden is. So what's my messaging to the guys in that locker room? Oh, if you're a good guy, you do all the right things on and off the field, I won't reward you. But you being insubordinate somewhere else, I'll bring you in here, and they're going to have to give him a contract extension. They're going to have to give him more guarantees. So that's the one thing I worry about. The second thing is, man, this is about ego. And as we saw in year number one, there is no one that has a bigger ego in the NFL than Jon Gruden. And we have seen the interviews with Antonio.
Right.
So now we have two of the biggest egos meeting. And if Antonio think he didn't have any support in Pittsburgh with the ownership, with the general manager, what's he going to do? If he don't like Gruden, does he go to Mike Mayock?
Well,
be like, okay, the coach hired you. So Gruden is the power broker in Oakland. I just don't believe those two egos can exist the way that they're currently trying to do business.
Because I do think Antonio is going to be best served on a team where the buck clearly stops with the head coach. And in no place is that more than in Oakland, where he's got 9 years left on his deal. So in one regard, that's a good thing, that Gruden can tell him exactly how it's going to be. So that sounds like it's a decent idea. If I didn't have an idea who Antonio Brown is at this point and who Jon Gruden is at this point, and that strikes me as, not knowing them personally, as oil and water.
100%.
And which is why it's so surprising to me that the Raiders would be one of the teams he keeps being linked to. I would think Jon Gruden would be going the absolute opposite direction.
To me, it sounds like desperation. And to me, he doesn't have time to slow build it. He's got to.
He had talent.
He had talent. And I think the Raiders know we are not a free agent destination.
No.
To get players, going to be through the draft or trade, because people aren't signing up to come play here.
All right, we got to take a break there. Coming up, a little basketball to talk about. Kyrie Irving had some spicy comments about the media criticism that he's faced. We'll hear those comments next on First Things First.
Kyrie's right.
We're spicy.
I think so about you, see?
No, he's not talking about me.
Today's Best Western? What does that mean?
With rewards points that never expire, you get free nights fast. Now stay 2 separate times and get a free night. Book now at bestwestern.com.
There's someone we think you should talk to. Hey, Dan, your coworkers told me you haven't done your taxes. I just want to say, you can call a TurboTax Live CPA for help.
You'd really do that for me?
Yeah, Dan, it's literally my job.
Thanks, guys.